It's not you. It's me.
You're giving me the "it's not you, it's me" routine? I invented "it's not you, it's me." Nobody tells me it's them, not me. If it's anybody, it's me.
All right. George, it's you.
You're damn right it's me.
Hey everybody, it's Plasma1945 and I'm coming to you with a technical video because this is actually something that came up a couple of times and I figured I'd break it down and show you guys that it's not you, it's probably me or the server or the mission that you're flying, because one of the biggest challenges is getting the FPS. So we have an F5 and a hangar, and look at the difference in the FPS. In one case we're getting 37 and the other one we're locked in at 60. And we all know that the FPS is how quickly the frames are shown on your screen. The more, the smoother it looks. So we are on Enigma server, and I'm just using the server as an example. I love Enigma server, but we're on the server and we're getting 37 FPS in a hangar, and then we crank the resolution all the way down to potato mode and we're getting 48 FPS. So we're getting 10 FPS approximately, even though we've gone from maximum graphics to potato mode on a 3090. But in a hangar on another server, we're getting 60 FPS stable. Now what we have to know about FPS is that the more FPS you want to have, the more of them have to be sent from your video card and your CPU to your screen. And there's something really neat. If you go Control Pause, that is right Control Pause twice, you're going to get a breakdown of not just your FPS, but also the frame time. And the frame time is basically what is being sent to the screen in what order and how fast. The lower the frame time, that is the time between frames, the more frames you're going to get. And if you go Control Pause twice, it'll actually break it down into additional details, specifying each component and how much of it is eating up how many frames per second. And as you can see, between these two servers, there's something called simulation that is eating up a lot of frames on one server, but not on the other. As a matter of fact, 5 times more. And of course, as we know, Enigma server is pretty complex, and there's a few other servers and missions that are quite complex. The more complexity you add to the server, the more your computer has to think about the simulation and more the server has to think about the simulation. And this isn't just the stuff that you're seeing on the screen. This is the stuff that's happening on the battlefield that you're not seeing. Now there's other components. So for example, here, as I turn my head around in my cockpit, my shadows and mirrors numbers are going to go up. But as you can see, none of them are really breaking 10, 15 milliseconds. They're pretty low. It is really the simulation that really kills you in these games and in DCS, because DCS is not quite as optimized as it should be. So when there's a lot of tasks happening on the ground, you are gonna get slammed by the simulation. And very often people think they need a better video card or better CPU or whatever, but it's not really gonna make that much of a difference. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is the number of objects on the screen. So some people say, some maps are more detailed. Yes, they are. And also it matters how many objects are on the screen. So in this case, there's 300 objects, and as I look around, you can see more or less objects within this screen. And of course, outside, we've got even more objects. We've got 332 objects, so these are the trees and the berms. And as you look around, turn on mirrors, more objects will appear and they'll slow you down, but we're still stable at 60. Now going over to Growling Sidewinder, where there's total madness and it was just as busy as Enigma server, if we look for the performance, again, we're on the F5 and we're going to look at the simulation, and there's a lot of things happening, explosions, planes taxiing and flying, but there's less programmed activity going on. And look at the number of objects on the screen here. We can see trees, buildings, it's triple, quadruple the number of objects. And so what's happening here is we've got a lot of objects, lots of things crashing, blowing, people taxiing. It's very busy, but our simulation is much lower. So our total shadows, our reflections, our airplanes are about the same for the load on the video card, but we're getting way more FPS, and that is because here the simulation is only using 10 milliseconds at best, whereas on Enigma server, or again, any other complex mission or map where there's a lot of stuff going on in the background, we were using up to 20, 30 40 milliseconds, which literally cuts your frame rate in half because you need 6 to 10 milliseconds per frame in order to get 60 FPS. So this is really the details that you can go by pressing Control Pause twice to see what's eating up your performance, whether it's shadows, whether it's reflections, or something else. And this is my single player mission that I've created for benchmarking my machine. I've loaded it up to be pretty complex, so it kind of simulates what heavy growling Sidewinder or even Enigma server load can do. And noticeably, servers like Growling Sidewinder have improved their simulation time, so that's why it's getting a little smoother flying there. Now here I'm just flying over on an SU-27. There's a lot of stuff happening in the background, but there is a significant frame dip. That frame dip is caused by a whole bunch of MLRSs launching their rockets. And look at the FPS here as those MLRSs launch. We've gone from about 45 to down to 34, 32, and it gets even messier. So we have a whole bunch of MLRS launches towards an empty open field, and when I hit pause, we go back to 60 FPS because nothing's being calculated. But remember, the game is going to calculate what each missile is going to do, and the missile has cluster munitions inside of it, so each cluster munition is going to calculate. And it's going to affect even the performance of this A-10 on the other side of the map where we can't even see those munitions. So remember, if there's a battle going on one side of the map and bombs being dropped, that's going to lag out the whole server or the whole mission. And so here the munitions are going to dispense. I'll pause it for another second, and you can see there's a bunch of tanks. We'll focus on these tanks and zoom out a little bit and watch the explosions go off. So here's the first hits from those sub-munitions. So I'm going to unpause here and watch what happens to the FPS. 10, 15 FPS at the lowest. This is pretty incredible. It's just lag-tastic. Now, as soon as the explosions clear and the warheads and munitions are no longer being calculated, our FPS comes back slightly. And again, this is happening on the ground. It doesn't even need to be within sight of your aircraft. So right now I'm actually going to fly right over that same battlefield. And when you replay, if you actually create a track and replay, it'll perform a little bit better. So you got to do it in real time, so it's refresh calculations each time. And that's what I'm doing here. So I'm in my airplane, and watch the FPS, 35, 34. It's pretty busy, and that's because the MLRSs are planning their launch. So even if a tank is engaged or driving around, it's going to be using that simulation performance. The more tanks there are, the more they're engaging, the more complex it's going to get. And look at the FPS, it just dropped to 23. Now, why did it drop to 23? I bet you that's because the MLRSs have just launched. So let's give it a second here. Let's see, is it going to get better? Nope, it's not getting better. And we'll pause and let's take a look on the F10 map. And yep, here come the MLRS launches. Each one of those missiles is being calculated by the game, by the mission, for its impact position. So we come back and our FPS catches up, because when you pause it goes to 60. And as you can see, we are tanking. Even though we're not looking at those munitions, they're exploding somewhere behind our airplane. It is still affecting our performance. And so this is what I mean. It's not you, it's not your video card. It could just be the mission is that complex or something's happening. We're down to 17 FPS. We're just getting slammed, 11 FPS. This is insane. And this is happening behind you. You're not even seeing it. Your video card isn't even rendering it, and it's still hitting your performance. So the trick here is be aware that certain munitions, when exploding, will cause drops in FPS. Be aware that tanks and units on the ground that are active are going to drop your frame rates, because each of those tanks has to think where it's going to go and what it's going to do. And this is all because it is a simulation. The game is very complex, and there's a lot of things going on. And also, DCS isn't supremely optimized to use all 8, 16, or 24 cores, or whatever super CPU you may have. At best, I've seen it load up 2 or 3 cores, and it's still not quite enough for it. Now, same flyover, all I did is I went in and I deleted some of the units from the ground, and I got rid of the MLRSs, so they're not going to launch. And as you can see, by cutting back the number of units that are on the map, even those that I can't see, and getting rid of those MLRS launches, I'm no longer at 35, 40 FPS. I'm at around 47, 48. And this is at full graphics on a 10700K processor with 8 cores and a 3090 RTX Founders Edition video card. Yeah, we've got some launches. The SAMs are launching there, but we're getting nowhere close to the 30 FPS mark we were at before. We're at 47 FPS and holding strong. So guys, hopefully you found this video interesting. If you have liked it and you thought this was kind of cool and gives you an idea as to what's going on under the hood within DCS, leave a comment. That makes a big difference. Share it. Spread it to other forums and other sites and Facebook or wherever else. And of course, subscribe and support the channel. Give it the thumbs up. And remember, it's not you. It's me. Wait, no, it's... We just need DCS to get a little more optimized so it knows what to do with those cores. And try not to put in MLRS and cluster munitions into your missions, because that will improve your performance. As for the servers, Enigma's server is extremely awesome. I love flying in there, and it is a complex mission with moving targets. So full props to the team that created it and that's running it. And optimization may help there, but that's about it, guys. Plasma 1945 signing off, and keep flying.